Hi, everybody. Today we will be talking about queerness and spirituality and answering some questions. Brittany was actually a special guest in our Sunday school this past Sunday, and she answered a lot of your questions, but we had a couple more, and we wanted to gather and share space once again and just continue the conversation and have you be able to revisit this if you're needing to. And so for people who don't know you, Brittany, would you like to reintroduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Brittany. I create content about spirituality and queerness and polyamory, and I will take any excuse to hang out with Sydney. So I'm really happy to do this. And this is my cat, Ting Ting.
Oh,
I love her. She's like, she wants to be a part of the party.
classic. I literally, before we started this, I had one of mine hopping around, but I'm convinced that she knows the second I turn the camera on because she just does not want to be seen. Like, she is a diva and in like a terrible way. Okay, so let's just dive in. So the questions I'm asking are ones that you provided. I'm going to keep everybody anonymous because that's just easier to do a Q&A like this. But the first question was, did people ever reject you based on sexuality?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, I think that especially when I was younger, there was this idea that girls that were queer or bi were like sluttier or impure because of their orientation. And there were like a lot of assumptions about what I was like doing with people, even before I became sexually active. That was like, it was so in the consciousness that people would kind of project that onto me, even my peers, but also adults. And so I would experience, a lot of slut shaming. People that would like otherwise kind of be interested in me would create drama about me being bi and then, no longer want to be with me anymore. And I mean, it was a hard hit on my ego, but also like it kind of caused me to question my sexuality. Like, is this really what I want for myself? And is this really like how I want my life to be? I'm very blessed that when I got older, I was able to find a queer community and kind of understand that wasn't my experience alone, but there was a lot of rejection, and not even just like in a relationship way, but also like in friendships. People would not really want to associate with someone who was queer if they were like really religious, and they didn't really know any better because their parents were just telling them like it's bad and wrong and you'll go to hell, like don't hang out with the queers or whatever. Like, unbeknownst to them, Jesus is like washing the feet of prostitutes and hanging out with homosexuals all the time. Like, there's really no biblical reason for that. But they, it was a different time. They really didn't know that. So I do have a lot of forgiveness for people that treated me like that when I was younger. And as I get older, I still receive like a little bit of like judgment. It's not as much rejection. I just know how to stay away from people that would reject me so that I don't get in that situation. And I also know how to stand up for myself a little more and kind of just assert like, yeah, I'm a queer woman, and what I'm doing with my partners has nothing to do with you anyway. And it definitely doesn't affect, how pure I am or how loved I am by God by any means.
Yeah. I heard this, I heard somebody say to me once, like, oh, well, it's just really popular right now to be gay, and they're choosing to be gay because it's popular. And my like immediate like response when I've heard someone say this before was basically like why would someone choose to be oppressed? And I remember I had to say that to somebody, like, even I know, like, why would anybody choose to be oppressed? And so like I think about that a lot when, people are like, oh, well, you're choosing this sin or whatever people say.
Or it's like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, like, obviously, like, we grew up together. For those who are watching and don't know, like, we were in youth group in a church together. And so
Oh yeah, I should have said that in my intro. We met at a youth group. We like Yeah.
Yeah. And so like we heard the same stuff of people saying that like that's not okay. And like I don't know what you remember and internalize, but I remember like moments that I internalized and were like, great, because these are the adults that I trust, that's what I'm gonna follow and that's what I'm gonna remember. And it's like those moments like impacting my life until like I don't know, a year, 2 years ago to like actually like literally have to unlearn and like not think something so fast because like that's what I was taught. And because like for me going to the church when I was in 8th grade, 9th grade, whatever, like the first things I was taught was my foundation. And so like hearing these things as like my foundation of spirituality of like being a good Christian, quote unquote. And so like if I am not doing the things they told me to, then I'm just not a Christian. Like obviously like I'm doing it wrong. Um and so
That's an interesting point because I think, we talked a little bit when we did the meeting, or the class, I don't know what y'all call it, but the gathering, um, about like how bisexuality was kind of popular when I was in adolescence. And so I did kind of get called out like, oh, you're just faking it because you want attention from boys. And that did stay with me because it like really prevented me from expressing myself fully. It prevented me from having healthy relationships with women until I worked on that. You know what I mean? Like it damaged me in a way. And I had a girlfriend a couple years ago who said that she knew that she was bi when she was young, but she didn't come out because she was so scared of being bullied. And every time she would try to be with a woman, it felt unnatural for her. And she also grew up in the church as well. And, had some trauma from that, the churchy stuff. So it is something that stays with us. And I think now an important thing to point out is that is happening to transgender children because now it is becoming more popularized and exposed as a reality. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with something being a fad. Like it enabled me to explore my orientation. And if it weren't a fad, if it weren't in the pop culture and the zeitgeist, I wouldn't have even known, I wouldn't have had a word for it because I always knew I liked girls, but I didn't know like what to like how to label that until it became like a meme. And so I think that we really need to acknowledge how trans people get that projection a lot right now, saying like, oh, you probably shouldn't transition because it's not going to be cool forever. Or like, are you sure you're not just faking it? Like maybe you're just a tomboy. And it's like, that is bullcrap. Look at me not cussing. It totally dismisses their journey and also let people figure it out. Like if some like, and I, as a Christian, I got that a lot. Like, oh, you're not really a Christian if you're gay, or you're not really a Christian if you party, or you're not really a Christian if you whatever. And it's like, I'm a Christian if I love Christ and I love God. Like I know what makes me a Christian. So, but that didn't come easily. It came with like inner work and having to a lot of like journaling and meditation, like researching queer history is super valuable because we know based on history, documented history, that there were a lot of trans people, a lot of queer people, even in this Puritan stuff is pretty recent in our history. And so if we go back just a little further, we'll be able to figure it out, I think.
yeah, and I think we're seeing a lot more of that work being done of like looking at even just like translations of the Bible and seeing like how this even how we got here. And I've enjoyed people going on that journey that like are figuring it out. Because obviously, and especially when you like look up to even authors, like Christian authors, like, and you read their books and you're like, cool, well, they obviously have a huge church, have a huge following, have made a book, they've probably done the research, I will follow what they say. And like, that's super complicated because then like, what were they looking at? And also like, why do we trust this one guy? I have seen so many people quote like the same two books, and it's just like, I get it because you respect and you love this author, whoever he or she is, usually he, but like, it's just like why is that like your end all be all just because this person, like, you have to do the work to like even see if it's accurate or see if like they've internalized anything to have like the message in the book, whatever that may be, which is great. But also that'll lead to my question number 2. Did the church ever hurt you? I guess we kind of went over that a little bit, but specifically, did the church ever hurt you?
Yeah, I think that people that go to church don't always go there because they like to read the Bible. They don't always go there because they like Christ and want to be like Christ. They don't always go there because they believe in God or because they've done a spiritual journey within themselves to find Christianity. Some people really just go to church for the community and to reinforce the beliefs and validate the beliefs that they were handed down by their, either Christian parents, Christian family, or like the society they grew up in. And so the benefit of church is that anyone is welcome. And then the shadow of that is that sometimes people that don't really have the best interest of their community at heart can get kind of clouded with their ego around certain things. And so most of what I noticed in the church that was damaging to me was, now it's kind of hip to question authority. But then, it was really difficult for me to have conversations with adults that were in a position of authority in the church because it didn't really seem like there was a precedent set for how the youth group is able to show up in the church at all. Like, it was really hierarchical. Like, I don't think I said that word right, but it was like a top-down situation where it's like, here's the adults, and then there's like a little web, here's the youth group, here's the youth choir, here's all and they're kind of planning that experience for us, which, when we're children and adolescents, so much of our life is planned for us. It's frustrating. But, I saw some wiggle room for that of how we could lead a little more. And I think that we did make change, you and I especially, during that time. And what hurt me was just getting this constant message that like what you're saying is not important. What you're saying isn't true. What you're saying isn't valid. Instead of having more of a dialogue and a conversation about disagreements and people not really meeting me where I was, like intellectually, like being able to just kind of, because in my mind, I'm like, oh, well, if I point out this indiscrepancy in the scripture and I find my own interpretation in my like queer punk rock way, like, an adult that I trust and that I love who works in a church and has humankind's best interest at heart will either agree with me or they'll show me like where I'm kind of misguided. And instead I kind of just got ignored a lot of the time and not really like validated or met where I was at. And so that was pretty painful. It kind of set me up to not really want to challenge as much as I think I should. And I also think some of that wasn't just because I was outspoken and queer. It was also because I was a woman. I was a girl. And I was seeing men and the boys in the youth group being, elevated to a point that I was not allowed to be at. And I think having a male youth director was one of the reasons that was true. And that male youth director probably didn't do any inner work around misogyny. No offense. So, but at the time, like I'm saying these words, I didn't know these words when I was 15, 16, 17. Like I didn't even have a language for it. So we were really all a victim of the same thing, which was blissful ignorance. Like, and I think that one thing that I wish the church could maybe take a stand on collectively is just being able to like listen to their congregation more in the same way that we have a nation that listens to our citizens, and we're seeing that fail. But we can create a situation that is a lot more collaborative and a lot less top down, and kind of really honoring the fact that all men are created equal, all women are created equal, all genders are created equal, and we all should have a seat at the table. So that, I think that, I know I was going to talk about how it damaged me, but really it just taught me. It taught me a lot, and it was hurtful at the time. And there was so much that was confusing that I didn't have the language for yet. But like the fights that you have when you're in your adolescence, you get the fruit when you're in your 20s. Like the fruit comes through if you do the work and you revisit your past and you figure it out, So I wish that I made decisions at time knowing that, but I'm not at that age, so who cares?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think about like the things that we heard and dealt with, and still we're like, the classic, like, well, you just don't get it. And
Yeah. And like
yeah.
being negated in our spirituality as well, like being told that we're less Christian, or we love God less, or we don't understand Christ as well because of our perspectives, when really our perspectives were just different. They weren't wrong or bad. They just had a rigid idea of what a Christian looked like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they didn't like to challenge anything that they had grown up knowing. And I know that's difficult. Obviously, we've seen that this past month of people identifying their own racism internally, much less actually rechecking their spirituality and the basis of it. So they end up just hurting other people when they don't do the same thing, believe the same thing. Which will lead into question 3. What kept you spiritual even now?
That's a good question. Here's the thing. I believe God exists. I believe in the Bible. I believe all that stuff. But when we experience doubt or like a dark night of the soul, or we're kind of in a shadow period, it is difficult for us to know or feel a connection with God. And those occurred a lot and still occur for me because I'm so intellectual. It's hard for me. It's hard. It's not easy.
It's hard.
But
someone's got to do that.
I like always knew I was queer. Like that was always true. And I think that what kept me kind of in a state, because there were times when I went away and I came back, and what I think that when I went away, what brought me back was realizing that it is in line with all of Christ's teachings, the things that I believe at my core. Like there is an alignment between the things that Christ taught and the way that I want to live and love and show up in the world. And when I started studying religion and like, spirituality, like I was trying to find a practice that was going to be useful for me. And I didn't think that Christianity was going to show back up by any means. And then I started looking into Christ consciousness, and I started just having memories of that time. And I started going to therapy and doing some work around my trauma, because I was also traumatized as an adolescent, not only by the things that happened to me in the church, but also by my family life. And so there were just things that started to come to the surface. And when I distilled it all down, I was like, there are a lot of other prophets in the world, and Christ is the one that resonates with me the most. And the structure of Christianity is such that I agree with it more so than a lot of different. That doesn't mean that I reject any other religion. It's just what I choose to follow. And now that I know more about every religion because of my studying, I am able to make a more informed decision. And I think like what was missing in my younger life was that I wasn't really making as informed a decision, because it was just like, oh, you're in Texas. If you want a religion, you better go to a Christian church, and I didn't have as many opportunities to explore other things. And this is true for all of the things in my life that have become a part of my identity, is I like to study the opposite. And I think that's a key to empathy. Like if I'm queer, I want to study the internalized, maybe like discrimination that I have about queerness. If I'm white, I want to study what Black culture is like and what Black people are going through, so that I can make an informed decision about how I show up in the world. And the way that religion showed up for me again was like, oh yeah, like even though, people tease me a lot for being a Christian. Like, I get teased a lot for bringing up Christ and bringing up the scriptures. And it's because so many people are traumatized by Christianity, and that's not okay. It's not okay what the Christian church has been doing. But if we don't reform the Christian church, we're not going to be able to do anything about it anyway. Renouncing my religion isn't going to change what the church is doing still all over the world to children, people of color, people of other nationalities and religions, immigrants, politics. Like, the church is corrupt, but that doesn't make me less Christian. It just makes me like frustrated at the way that the same things that are ruining our world, like patriarchy, white supremacy, hierarchical setups, like the one we were describing, that came into the church and that screwed it up for everybody. And now we have generations of people that are traumatized by that. And the only people that can heal and help it are the people that believe in Christ and God. It's not going to be atheists that save us from the tyrannical church. It's going to be Christians. And so I don't know if that really answered the question, but that's how I stay spiritual, is through anger. Not really, but a little.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. I remember there was a point before I started working, in the church, and I don't even know at what point, but I was just like, I knew, well, never mind. I know exactly the point. It's because I saw a really terrible youth director, and I was like, someone like that has this job, someone like that has influence, has people they talk to, and is doing teaching and is telling these kids like these lessons that I know are problematic, bad, whatever. And it's like he still has a job, and to this day has a job. And if I know that and I feel that and I'm angry about that, and I know that what this job can be and like what people in the church can do, like, then I have to do it. Like, if I don't do the job, someone else like him will fill this spot and will keep filling these spots. And even in college, like, I saw people who were like this, like, I got to be in the church and work in the church just because my dad does. Not because they were convicted to do it, but because they're like, oh, lineage, like we, Methodist pastors, 4th generation, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and I knew this guy well. And like, that doesn't mean that like you're convicted to do any of this. And so I think about that a lot, because like, if we don't stay in the church because we know and we've been changed by it, then we're going to lose it. We're going to lose it to this culture of this new, terrible, like, corrupt Christianity. And I remember last summer, it was like July, I was journaling because I was just like, if like we don't do the work and like fight back, like who will? And it's hard because it's like this whole new generation, sorry kids, like it's just like, it seems like worthless, like what's to fight for? And it's like, because I know it can mean so much. And if like we give it the time to realize like what it means, like there can be such like a big impact. And I'm afraid sometimes that like progressives, like we're gonna lose the church and being spiritual. And this has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, but I'm gonna keep the flow of it going. 4th question, what's your favorite verse or story of the Bible?
Well, I have a lot of resonance with the prodigal son because of my back and forth with Christianity. And the story of the prodigal son is about the son that runs away and he comes back and God is waiting with open arms. And to me, that has always been the reason that I think that story resonates so much with me, is not because like I ever leave or like run off, but I think that all of us get into like a routine for a little bit and we're like, oh my gosh, I am so spiritual right now. And then there are times when we're just not feeling it as much. And like my practice has been, one is just parsing out the difference between what's true about my religion and my spirituality and my Christianity and the messages I'm getting from the outside world. And the more I parse those apart, and the more I actually read scripture and read history, and even just meditate and pray as well, the more I start to be able to, in those times when I'm not feeling it, still have a dialogue with God and still feel like I'm not totally disconnected from source or from the universe. Like I still feel very held. And I think that one of the sweet things about the prodigal son is that they don't get punished for getting distracted. They don't get, punished for having doubts or running away. And a lot of the things that we see in the Bible as it stands now, the punishments are internal. We do it to ourselves. And Christ really wants us to relax about that. And he kind of talks about it a lot. And he's like, do well to the people around you and serve the world the best that you can, and keep God in your heart. Love God with all your heart and soul. And those aren't hard to do. And the parables of the Bible and the story of the Bible are so direct about that. I think the fact that it's been so toxified by the culture that it was translated in is really unfortunate, and a little bit of part of the problem. But what I've been able to do is hold those stories and those concepts as at a higher level within me than, say, like a certain quote from the Bible. Because that's the other thing, is people weaponize scripture. That's true of all magic, every spirituality, all religions. Mm-hmm. It's neutral. There's nothing good or bad about the Bible. It's how you use it. There's nothing good or bad about witchcraft. It's how you use it. There's nothing good or bad about any sacred text. The only thing that makes it sacred is not its validity or its virtue, but its protection. That's what being sacred is it's protected. And it can be weaponized for either side. And so that became more of how I feel about scripture than the scripture I'm actually into. But I mean, there are such great nuggets from the Bible. I think that the stories are the most important part, because storytelling is how we communicate and how ancestors communicate with us. So
yeah, I think that's completely valid, because I feel like, and even just with stories, like what you resonate with right now might be different than what you resonate with 5 years ago.
100%.
Yeah. And it's just like, and even like the prodigal son, like at some point, did you feel like the other son, like doing all the good works and somebody else being like welcomed back, even though they fell away? Like at what point do you, like, is
Stop
that
being salty?
Yeah.
Not that kind of salt of the earth, okay? Sorry.
Those are the footnotes that I want in a Bible, honestly.
Oh my gosh, if we wrote something, we'd have so much fun.
Honestly, yeah. It'd just be like what you're already thinking, but don't worry, I wrote it down for you, Bible.
Yeah.
I will lead into question 5, which is, did you ever have mentors?
I did have mentors. I would say that our youth pastor, despite their flaws, was a great mentor to me as an intellectual and a studier. Like that's kind of the place that they held in my life. And then I also had teachers at my school that like knew my situation and really wanted to motivate me to be like as expressive and creative as I could. When it comes to queerness, I really didn't have as many. I learned about queerness a little from my mom, but I mean, that being said, I was bi and she's a lesbian. So there's still within the queer community, the LGBTQI community, a segment of like bi erasure that I think was really prevalent in like the 90s, early 2000s, and has some of the way kind of come out a little, but I mean, there's still a lot of bi erasure in the queer community, long story short. So even though she helped me a lot, it is difficult for her to kind of understand, where I'm coming from with my experience. And it's easy to kind of, to not really, I mean, she's so sweet, but there's just not as much connection in that way. And then as I got older, when I got kind of out of high school and out of the house and had a little more freedom, my recommendation to my younger self at that time would be to really seek out more queer people that probably would have helped to actually like maybe join a group for people my age that were queer, or like go to queer events. And that kind of started to happen at that age, but I wasn't as like actively involved in it. And I had a very sweet friend, Anna, who shared my queerness, and we went to a gay prom this one time, and I met a bunch of, they weren't much older than me. They were probably like, 25, 24, and I was like 17, 18. So there was only so much they could do for me, because like I'm 25 now. I don't know what's going on, but they definitely had more experience in like dating, like the physical side of those kinds of relationships and how to navigate that. They taught me things like consent language and consent culture. They taught me about intersectional feminism. It's like they were just so far and away more educated about that stuff, as a symptom of being a member of an oppressive group and taking responsibility for that, and kind of understanding that we are all in this together. And we really do have one common enemy, which is judgment and a story, judging people and telling them they're wrong. And so I learned a lot from them at that time. A lot of midnights at Denny's. There was a little bit of clubbing, but it was mostly just like, those kind of conversations weren't had when I was younger. So, and I don't really know if there's a solution for that, because sexuality is really hard to talk about at that age. There's not any good sex education for queer people. I mean, maybe online.
Hold on, let me plug this. Hi, kids. I teach sex education every summer.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, we do like even like same-sex relationships and queer relationships, and like what it's like to be like, what's like a sexual attraction, a physical attraction, emotional attraction, and like
that's that shit I needed.
Yeah, I literally did a training in San Francisco, and it was like the most information going into my brain in like a 48-hour period. To just hear things like this, and then people who are like way older than me who are going to teach these classes like 40, 50, being like, yeah, we know this, and me being like, oh man, oh no. Like, just like, I didn't know this stuff. And they're like, there's resources in the back if you want them. And they're like, oh, we have that. And I'm just like taking all these pamphlets. And now they're like, there's some hanging up in my office, because I was just like, I never knew this stuff. Like, I mean, we grew up, North Houston, suburbia, but like they're never gonna talk about any of that stuff. And so like knowing how to teach that too is just so valuable. So kids, sex ed might not seem cool, but dang it, it's gonna be.
Well, that's the other thing is like, I really hope that what's happening now, as we kind of like lift the veil on some of these oppressive institutions, is that not just adolescents, but also adults will be able to question their sexuality without feeling afraid, be able to question their gender without feeling afraid, being able to question, I mean, I bet that there are so many asexual people right now that feel that they are trapped in a relationship that they have to have sex in. And that's unacceptable. And it's like that kind of exposure and that kind of information isn't just for queer people. It is so straight people that don't really get it, or that were raised in sheltered childhoods, have the opportunity to examine what's going on in their head and in their body, and kind of understand, some of us are really ruled by things that we should not be ruled by, like how we look naked, how we perform, how we are perceived by people that we're attracted to, stuff like that. That once you start just examining what a relationship really is, and talking about consent and talking about your self-image, that stuff starts to fall apart. And that's not even just in reference to queerness, that's more in reference to like personal value. But if I had gotten that information sooner, it wouldn't have been this crazy conversation of like, do I have sex before marriage or not? Ugh. It's like, that's not the question, dude. That's like so far down on the list. It's like, how do you choose your partners? How do you keep yourself safe in bed? How do you talk to your parents and your community and your peers about sexuality and gender? And, like, those are the questions that matter, that influence a bunch of other people. Like, one person across the table from you that you're on a date with is not the end of the world, ever. The world is so much bigger than that, and so much bigger than relationships, and so much bigger than, it's the kingdom of God. Like, what an insult to the kingdom of God to be like caught up in all of that, goo of oppression and feeling insecure. It's just not fair.
I like the way you put that. That's a really good way to put that.
I
Because
appreciate the soapbox.
I mean, it's an important soapbox, and I feel like it's hard when you're younger to talk about it because it feels like awkward and stuff like that. But like, also, like, why does it feel awkward? Like, it really shouldn't be. Like, this is supposed to be something normal. And so, the way our church works, the way we do sex education is basically like it's like a week camp, and it's like my hope is that after that week camp that things aren't so like they don't have to be just trapped into that week. Like we only talk about this during this week, and then once we're out the door at 4 p.m. on Friday, like we never talk about it again. Like ask me if you need something, but like don't bring it up. But like it shouldn't be like risque. Like these are questions that should be normalized and should like we should be having these conversations, especially when you are in a same-sex relationship and you need to have these questions answered because maybe when you were in 7th grade you were like, cool, whatever, I don't really whatever, and then in 10th grade you're like, actually, what's that information again? And like,
Ah!
yeah.
10th grade is just me saying the whole time.
I was talking today to one of the youth about like me as a sophomore, and I was just like, that was just a disaster. Like, can I just like erase? Like, for some reason, I was thinking about homecoming, and I thought I was so cool, and I was just like, oh, God.
Hey, we were cool. Whatever. We were the coolest dorks I've ever seen.
Honestly, look at us. Look how we turned out. Everything turns out fine.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at us having this conversation. It's like, I mean, we have rapport because we know one another, but these conversations are not just about sex. They're also medical, emotional, sociological, psychological. The distillation of partnership and relationship and sexuality has really not served. We're really dynamic humans, and we should be reconciling and making very serious choices about who we decide to be intimate with. That's true. And I don't think the Bible is making a mistake when it says stuff like that. But I just don't think that guilt and shame and hiding things are how you help God heal you or help God guide you. Like, you have to bring it to the light in order for him to see it. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I've been thinking about? I've been thinking about gendering God as they.
Our church, it's kind of like, it depends on the person. Some people say he, she, they. When we do like, it's not even, we don't even call it the Lord's Prayer anymore because Lord is like he gendered. We say creator, and so like creator God. Yeah.
I love that.
Like there's a prayer for the Father's Day. I have it printed out in front of me because I'm gonna have my dad help me when I go home tomorrow. But like at the beginning, it says like creator God.
I love that so much. Cool. Well, now I'm going to try to do a they from now on. That's what I'm going for. Feels better.
Yeah. Yeah. Because also I feel like for a long time, gendering God, it felt like a disconnect because I was like, he and she. Doesn't get me because he and she. And so talking about things like, I don't know if you understand that, which obviously like, they understand that, but like for me it was like going up to like, for us, like having our youth director who was a guy, like being like, do you understand my girl problems? And remembering him being like, no, don't talk, like why are we having this conversation? I'm just literally trying to drive you home. And I'm just like, yeah, but I have so many problems that I need you to solve. And so like that was like my thought on God. God was like, also, I know, like, go to the woman. And I'm just like, but yeah, it's just kind of nice to try to get that out of my head, to not have God be he. That sometimes like I forget to, just because like we grew up with it always being a he. And so I'll say it and
Well, we also grew up in a patriarchy, honey. So we're doing our best, but we have been programmed since birth to worship men. So that's a lot of unlearning. It's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah, most definitely. always think about when, and this is on topic but off topic, I think about when we first started going to that church. The second I started going, when the senior pastor came in, who was a woman, I remember people leaving the church because they were like, oh, a woman? Yeah, I'm out. And like, that was like the first thing I remember.
I remember that. Oh my God. I had like totally forgotten about that.
Yeah,
Ugh.
I remember asking, being like, what was wrong with her? Like, what did she do? They were like, woman, obviously. And I was like, you're gonna have to back up because I literally am starting from scratch. Like, what does that mean? And they were like, woman, not don't lead. And I was like, great, I, woman, am coming into this group wanting to be accepted, and you tell me don't lead.
Yeah. When like you are like a born leader and like a born teacher, like you have all of the elements of someone who would be standing up there talking on a stage, and then your first example of how that would go for you is like so diminishing. It's so funny how God like has such a good sense of humor.
Honestly, yeah, because my one of my favorite memories was, I think about the same woman. Her name is Nancy. I still have her on Facebook. She likes a bunch of my stuff, and it's just nice to know she's out there in the world doing stuff still. But anyways, one of my favorite memories was giving, we, in case kids you don't know, a testimony means like your story. But I gave my testimony for like our youth choir weird devotional thing in the church. And I remember like after I was done, like Nancy, the senior pastor, like stood up and clapped for me. And I remember like still to this day, like that will, like, if I think about it, like I'm tearing up right now. Like it makes me like bawl my eyes out because it was like she was like the first like woman leader I saw in the church.
Mm-hmm. And
And
look at
like,
you now. I bet she's so proud.
yeah, it's just kind of funny. Because also like I went back home and was talking to my mom about like the church and stuff, you know, like stuff you do with your mom. And we looked at the people who were pastoring the church, that she like tried to take when I was like super super little, like itty bitty. She tried to take me to, and then like I look at the church, look at like their history. They don't even accept like women preachers in the church, and I was like, Mom, your church is crap.
That's scary. In this,
And
I mean, I don't know what's going on in the suburbs, but it just blows my mind how that's still a problem.
yeah, exactly. And I think also because like at that point I already knew like I was gonna go to seminary, had already been accepted and everything. And so like telling my mom, like, hey mom, think about it. If I grew up to be this person in that church, same track, they wouldn't want me there. And so it's just like having that conversation with my own mom, be like, they wouldn't want me at all. Just like the basis of like woman. Don't even go down the tier of who the rest of who I am. Just woman, you're out. Like that sucks. And so like I think I still feel for like Nancy, like what that was like for her to go through to like go into a church and then be like, we have good attendance, but until you came and half the church left. And like I can't even imagine trying to like be a senior pastor of a church like that for like 3 years or something. Like she's better than I would have taken a left turn real quick.
Well, it's only because of women like that that we get to have women like us.
No, that's cute. I like that.
Oh,
You're so cute. Say that again.
I'm not a cat, Sydney. Gosh.
Okay,
Is that all of them?
There's one more.
Okay, I figured.
And it says, did your sexuality ever ruin friendships with people who didn't agree with it?
Oh yeah. I mean, the short answer is yes. A lot of people really don't want to be associated with queerness or homosexuality. They feel like by association it makes them less pure. And, you know, there's not really a lot of solutions to that because they're on their own journey. You know, like whatever God's plan is for them, it's not to be friends with you right now. You know what I mean? Because if y'all were supposed to be friends, then they might be a little further along on their acceptance of queer people, right? So I think that, you know, at the time I was really hurt by things like being rejected or losing friends, especially people that like didn't really know that I was queer and then would kind of find out. And then that would like, it would be like, oh, like we were getting to know each other and we seemed like we were pretty compatible. And I've always struggled to make friends. Like I'm loud and annoying, and I don't text back enough. Like I got a lot of flaws that prevent me from having friends. And so, being younger and like really wanting to kind of like, I think that there was this thing that I knew probably existed of like, just like a clique of like queer people who are, kind of interested in God. And like, it's so funny, all the people that came out after we left the church. And it's like, if y'all had just freaking listened to me at the time, you might have had an easier situation, but that wasn't their journey. It wasn't for them, And we were all still friends, but it's like we couldn't really be as, we didn't have the kinds of conversations that we're able to have now. So I wish that I had been a little more open to kind of understanding that when someone is judging me for who I am and how I live, it has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with how good I am at being a good little Christian girl. It has nothing to do with how much I love God or how much God loves me. It 100% has to do with either their ignorance or their hate or their misinformation or even just their family. Like the thing about internalized discrimination is that a lot of times it's protected by the people that are around them. And so I mean, I'm not going to be up in anybody's inbox, like telling them, oh, you're just ignorant and you don't know enough about queer people to really understand, like, blah, blah, blah. And like, you don't love God and that's not what the Bible says. Like, that's not useful because that's a little hateful too. But I mean, there's room to kind of be like a little angry. Like there are consequences to judging other people without really knowing them or, like kicking a friend out of your life because of a misunderstanding like that. And so, I wouldn't want to go as far as bullying, but it's just like, if you are confident in your identity and someone doesn't want to be your friend anymore because of that, that is 100% their loss, especially at an age where it's hard to be comfortable with your identity because we don't really know who we are yet, and we're figuring it out as we go. And for someone to say at any age really, but especially then, I am queer, I am trans, I am gay, like to even say that is revolutionary because we have so much programming both ancestrally and in the media and in our friend groups not to. So it sucks that people are punished for their bravery, but also God is just getting people out of your life that are not going to serve your highest good. And like, that's it. Like not everybody should be your friend and not everybody's going to be.
Yeah. And I think, along with that, like us being adults, like looking back, like who ended up being like good friends because like the best friends were the ones that were accepted you, the ones that you worked at really, really hard and for years, and you would have fights and then repair it. And then you became adults, you got busy, and then they fell off the face of the earth. And it's like, because that was always going to happen if they weren't in your proximity. And it just took like a final straw. And so like, I think about a friend I worked for so many years and the tiny little fight when we were adults and now we don't talk. And it's just like, I wish that I wouldn't have spent so much time trying to make something work and make them like me just for them to just like, it wouldn't matter in the long run. And the ones that like stuck around or, like for us, like we come in and out of each other's lives and it's been beautiful and glorious. And it's like, that's how it's supposed to be. And, but I know for teenagers to hear that, it's hard because like some people you grew up with and they've always been there since first grade. We're best friends. We're going to be best friends forever. And it's like, I remember like our youth director saying like, y'all aren't going to be friends forever. Like drop it, like just let it go. And I was like, no, because you said that, now I have to defy it. And now we have to have a reunion every 3 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we also took some time, like, that's the other thing about, I mean, being a teenager is like rejection hurts a little more at that age. Like our hormones are a little higher. And I mean, I struggle with a hormone imbalance as an adult. So I really never outgrown that. Like I still get a little inflammatory on accident. I'm sorry. But I really learned how to clean up my messes a little more, learn just how to apologize when I'm wrong. Like and that comes with time. It's like there's no negative thing that happened to me in my life that was not a huge blessing and lesson. And all it takes is just being able to, at the moment, remain as calm and connected as you can, and in the future look back and see what was there for you. You're not going to build Rome in a day. Like, you can't solve everybody's problems, including your own. It comes with time. That's why we have these long lives that feel very short. But, we have a whole lifetime to figure it out. And the little things that happen in between they're not unimportant, but they reverberate out like a pond in a puddle, and they teach us forever. Like, the things that happened to me in my youth group when I was that age still get brought up when I'm journaling, and still get brought up when I'm meditating, because those were teachable moments. Like, and there are still moments like that. And I want to kind of like find a church that that feels cool and right for me. But that's the other thing about looking at stuff online. It's different than having a community. Like me wishing that I had those friends when I was younger. It, like, resources and friends are not the same thing. Like reading a PDF and having like a friend you can talk to about queerness, like, not the same thing. So just drop the ones that aren't in it to win it and go find people that are.
Yeah, because also I think about like if you feel that way, and it's like you need somebody who supports you, there's probably somebody else in your grade, a grade above you, a grade who's about to be below you, becoming a freshman even, like they need someone like you also. And you've just been someone like they've been waiting for. And so like I think always be searching and trying to find people who will support you, because it's so hard to just be in a mode where you try to like not bring it up, but like,
yeah, like, why waste your time with people that you don't want to be friends with anyway?
Yeah, you can't just erase who you are, and like they want you to, like that's like their mode of action. And so just like drop them. Just, it's hard. And just like, and then all of a sudden like a weight comes off your shoulders because you were hindered by what they wanted of you. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, now I'm my person again. Like I don't have their weight of shame that they want me to feel. Like now I'm my person again. And it's hard. It's not easy. It's extremely hard. But those are my 6 questions for you. Is there anything you want to say to wrap up this little chat?
No, I feel like we got all the questions covered. I love chatting with you. I miss this so much. I would love to do this all the time, even just for fun. And if y'all ever have any other questions, feel free to let Sydney know and we'll come back on and talk. There's only so much I can say about it, but also it's very cathartic to acknowledge how it was, and kind of like affirm. I think that there's no such thing as being too confident. There really isn't. As long as you're being physically safe, there's no reason you shouldn't feel amazing about yourself and celebrate yourself. And this weird like insecurity, like, oh, well, if I think I'm great, then other people will think I'm conceited. And it's like, just be like a little conceited. Like, as long as you're not hating on other people, like, I think that would be my final thought, is just really try to figure out what feels confident for you and step into that. And that's not just about gender or sexuality. It's about anything.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because sometimes it's even just a hard place to get there, to feel confident, just like being okay with like the body you were given, like the body that you have control over. I think even just like feeling agency over your body and being like, who am I in this? And then being okay with it. And it's super hard when you're in high school because everyone's comparing each other and you're looking at things and this friend is like this and they're super this way and I want to be like that, blah, blah, blah. But like also there's probably someone looking at you being like, dang, I wish I was this person. Because I think about like when we were in youth group, like we played that game. Maybe it was just me being a 6 and wanting to be everyone else and wanting to be the best, but I was this.
Oh, well, I was jealous of everyone. I didn't want
I
to be
don't-
anyone else, but I definitely was jealous. Like,
yeah, and I just like I wish that I was like more okay with who I was as a person instead of trying to pretend to be you or be any of our other friends. And um, any of my students, it's hard. It's not easy. It takes work, but I think also just like once you do the work and are happy with who you are, like people are going to be like super jealous of you, honestly, because they're going to be like, why is she so confident? Who gave her permission to be so perfect?
God did, first of all. And then, second of all, I really think that confidence is not a destination. It is a practice. Like, you don't walk into like confidence and you're like, I live here now. Like, that's never going to happen. Like, it's, yeah. But yeah, confidence is hard. I think that your students are lucky to have you, Sydney.
Thank you. I love them a lot, and they probably are like, ew, but that's fine. It's just fine. We're gonna take over the world, and it's okay. It's fine. I'm comfortable with it. It's what's gonna happen. But
Well, I mean, all of us become the adults that we like smack talk. You know what I mean? Like, we were always like, adults are nerds. They don't get it. And now we're adults and we're like, hello, I'm a nerd. I don't get it. Like, it's like the circle of life. Honestly.
Yeah, it's gosh, it's funny to be at this age and be doing something like this.
I know. So special.
Yeah, I think about when you were turning 16 and I made you like this little scrapbook. I remember I have a photo in there, and I remember it was like us, like I don't even remember I don't remember what the photo was, but I remember it was just like, because it's on this photo, like we're gonna change the world. Because I printed this, it's gonna happen now. Like there's no like going back or something. And I think about that. So
well, we were on a crusade to save the world, and I'd say, looking at the work that we've done in even this short amount of time, we're doing it. So
yeah, like honestly, go us. This is actually just the whole thing is about us.
we're just celebrating each other, which is all that friends are supposed to do. Get you friends that celebrate you.